Whoa, I'm back, and once again I was too lazy to take 2 seconds just to screw in a mic stand, so I'm gonna be holding the mic again, just like last time, and today I'm talking about Just Before Dawn. So yeah, welcome to Spookier Celluloid, the channel where I just talk shit for like 10 minutes and try to make full sentences, and most of the time it doesn't work and these videos come out really bad. I don't know why people watch this channel when I have a main channel that's actually good. I think so, at least. I might be a bit too overconfident, but I think I do some pretty good stuff on the main channel. This channel is just an excuse for me to talk about just movies that I watch that don't really fit in with any other projects that I'm working on, which comprises mostly of me talking about slashers and gialli, because they're irrelevant to most of the other projects I have. But anyways, I just like movies. I just like horror movies, and I like Just Before Dawn. Now, this is a slasher that I've heard a lot about. This is pretty much considered one of the classics or more forgotten classic slashers of the 80s. It was released in 1981, I guess at the peak of the camp slashers, because I guess this one you could call a camp slasher, even though it doesn't really have much in common with those you would typically associate with camp slashers, those being Friday the 13th, The Burning, Sleepaway Camp. This isn't a summer camp, it's just a group of teenagers in their late 20s going on an adventure, going on, like, I guess a national park, but not really, since one of the characters technically owned the land. Anyway, they go up to a mountain with some lakes and shit, and they're just going there to go camping trip with the boys and the girls. And yeah, so it's not really what you'd assume it to be. Reading from the back of this really old 18-year-old now DVD from Shriek Show, it just reads like a typical camp slasher, but that's not what it is. It's, well, somewhat. It is very formulaic, it is very slasher-esque, but in a more, not profound, but more serious way. This is played serious. This isn't about the gore. This isn't about the body count. This isn't about piling up bodies. In fact, there's, I think, 3 or 4 victims in this. Well, if you don't count something that I don't really want to spoil, there's about 3-4 victims in this film. One of them is from the beginning. So like I said, it's pretty formulaic in the sense that the film starts, we get a murder scene, and then we get the typical setup for this kind of slasher. I was really happy and surprised because the first scene is starring the guy that plays Mel in Sleepaway Camp. Now, I love Sleepaway Camp. Sleepaway Camp is easily one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Favorite movies of all time. I watched Sleepaway Camp like pretty much every year around the beginning of summer. It's kind of a tradition. I adore that film. For me, that is a perfect like 10 out of 10 slashers. So, but the actor that plays Mel, I'm not familiar with. I think he's older. He's been in a lot of like 50s, 60s movies when he was way younger. But I saw him in the first scene, and just his voice is so amazing and so recognizable. I was so happy, and I knew I was in for a good time, which is exactly what I got. I wouldn't describe this as a super fun slasher. If you're with a group of friends and you just want to throw on something that you guys can watch and have fun, this isn't the one for you. This is super slow. What I like is that there's like 3 or 4 crazy Ralphs in this film. You have the forest ranger, which warns our teenage group of the dangers of going up the mountain, even though, unlike, let's say, a crazy Ralph character, he doesn't know that there's actual killers on the hill. He's just a forest ranger worried about them, getting lost or falling or drowning in a river with the falls. So he's not really a crazy Ralph character, and he's played by George Kennedy, which is again another surprising cast choice. He does a pretty good job. He's a very minor character. And then you have, of course, the guy that plays Mel, who escapes from the killer or killers. At that point in the film, we don't really know. And he's drunk out of his mind, and he warns the kid that up in the hill there is these demons. Again, his performance of being a drunkard is just perfect. I really adore him. I should watch more movies from him, but like I said, I think most of his stuff is like 50s, 60s not sci-fi westerns, which unless the westerns are Italian, I don't really care that much about like American westerns, especially from that era, because it's all like all fake wholesome John Wayne-esque type of stuff. I like the gritty. I like the down and dirty. You know, no good guys, no bad guys, just dirty assholes just fighting each other. So yeah, our group of teens is very likable, as were most of the characters and slashers of that era, which is sadly a forgotten aspect of slashers in modern film making. But again, I watched The Barn 2 recently, which I thought about doing a video on, but I might keep that for October. And the characters were super likable. So some slashers still have that, but most of the slashers are like your typical douchebag characters that you just want to see killed. This isn't that type of slasher, which I appreciate. I love dearly. I love when the characters are well written and not just disposable. Yeah, I really don't really have much to say about this film. It's very linear. It's very kind of cliche, especially looking back. At the time, I guess this wasn't super cliche, but looking back, you know, it's your typical slasher. But what I appreciate is that it's played more seriously, super well directed, it's really creepy, the atmosphere is present. I have to applaud the team. I don't think there's a making of, but I'm sure it was a pain in the ass to film at such a remote location in the wilderness, in the woods, so I applaud the team. The actors are really good. You also have this kind of backwoods aspect with these inbred rednecks, mountain people living in the woods. Again, those are really like cliche now looking back, but for the time they were a bit original. So I really like those characters too. They bring in another aspect to the film which differentiates it from your typical camp slashers. So overall, it's a really solid flick. Now, it's directed by Jeff Lieberman, and every time I bring him up in like update videos, because he's not really somebody I'm familiar with. I know the name, I've seen Squirm, now I've seen Just Before Dawn. I have Satan's Little Helper in my collection, which is one of his more recent films. I've met him in person at horror conventions. I just didn't really, at the time, I hadn't seen anything from him and didn't want just to get something signed just to say I had something signed. And every time I bring him up, people always say you gotta check out Blue Sunshine, which I'll eventually do when I find a copy. I feel like Blue Sunshine, I have to watch like a Blu-ray or the best version possible. I don't think a 2005 DVD from Shriek Show would cut it. Again, this is one of the least good-looking old Shriek Show DVDs I've seen. The transfer is muddy, the color is off, and a lot of points. But what I do appreciate about these older releases is that they didn't try to clean up the film too much, so we still got those green scratches that I just love, that, you know, remind me of exploitation cinema and, you know, how I first saw a lot of the films that I love today, which were shitty, gritty, full scratched up transfers of old exploitation films. So yeah, Just Before Dawn, I give it a 7.18. I really like it. I'd recommend it to camp slasher fans everywhere. It's a good movie.